Chapter 13. Locked In. "How long will it take to x-ray the letters?" Nancy asked the postal inspector. Mr. Wernick smiled at her. "You're thinking you won't have time to wait? You'd better. I have a hunch there are going to be some surprises in those letters, and I'm sure you'll want to know what they are. It won't take long." He summoned one of the technicians on duty and gave him the assignment. "We suspect there's money inside each of these," he said. The man was gone only a few minutes. He came back with the x-rays as well as the letters. "I'd say there are bills in every envelope. Probably $25 in each," he reported. Nancy was elated and waited for the postal inspector to comment. He said, "I think your idea of a Lonely Hearts Club and money coming in installments is a good one. We'll work on the case from this new angle. And of course," he added with a twinkle in his eye, "we'll expect all the help we can get from you." Nancy promised it and said she hoped that before the weekend was over, she might have startling news for him. She did not divulge what it was and soon said goodbye. "Oh, the evidence is closing in on Edgar Nixon," she thought. "Now if I can only keep Nancy Smith Drew from marrying him, everything will be wonderful." She picked up Bess and George, and as they rode toward Emerson, she told about the information she had received at the post office. The cousins were excited to hear this, but presently Bess said, "Between now and the time that you'd see Nancy Smith Drew at the play, let's talk about something besides the mysteries. I'd hate to meet Dave with my mind full of clues and crooks." George could not resist a jibe at her cousin. "That's better than nothing." Bess made a face and changed the subject. "There's a quaint-looking tea room ahead. Let's stop there for lunch. It's been a long time since breakfast." The others agreed, but Nancy said they must not spend too much time. They ate quickly, and 2 hours later, the towers of Emerson College came into view. Nancy drove directly to the Omega Chi Epsilon house, where the girls' dates were on hand to give them a warm welcome. Ned was tall, handsome, and athletic-looking, with wavy dark hair, a ready smile, and brown eyes. "I'm glad you made good time," he said, "because I want you to tell us all about this mystery business." Dave Evans was blond, green-eyed, and of rangy build. He gazed at Bess fondly. "You look stunning in that new suit," he remarked. "I like that fur collar. What is it, squirrel?" George spoke up. "Yep, she shot it on the way up here." Bess withered her cousin with a look. "As a matter of fact, it's mink." "How's the play coming?" Nancy asked Bert Eddleton, a short, blond, husky young man. He shook his head sadly. "Miss Drew hasn't returned yet. I don't know any more about coaching a Shakespearean play than I do about guiding a rocket to the moon. The whole thing's going to be a complete flop." Nancy was sorry to hear that the actress had not returned yet. She said she had hoped to see Miss Drew for a short time before the afternoon was over. A short time later, Bert announced that he and Dave would have to leave for a rehearsal. "See you after the show," Dave called as the two boys hurried off. That evening, Ned escorted Nancy, Bess, and George to the college theater, which was attached to the large gymnasium. After the audience was seated, one of the students in the drama group stepped in front of the curtain and said he wished to make an announcement. "I know all of you are expecting to see a performance of a Shakespearean play. As you have read, the club engaged the services of Miss Smith Drew, a drama coach. Unfortunately, she had a sudden errand out of town and has not returned." Nancy's heart sank. The heiress must have married Edgar Nixon. The announcer went on. "Late this afternoon, we fellows decided that it would be impossible to put on the play we had planned, so we have substituted a comedy. It is called The Mix-Up. We have been rehearsing this for some time, planning to present it in the spring. You won't find it so polished as we had hoped, but we trust you'll enjoy it." The good-natured audience clapped enthusiastically. The announcer stepped into the wings and the curtain opened. The play was well named, and the audience laughed uproariously. The star of the show proved to be Dave. He was so extremely funny, alternately playing a girl and her twin brother, that the audience broke into repeated applause. The mix-up was such a success that Nancy temporarily forgot her mysteries. But she was soon to be reminded of them. As she was walking out of the auditorium, one of Ned's friends spotted her. He called out gaily, "Hi, Nancy Drew!" At once, an attractive young woman, walking just ahead of Nancy, turned around and stopped. She smiled at the girl. "You're Nancy Drew?" When Nancy nodded, she went on. "For a moment, I thought you might be another Nancy Drew whom I know. As a matter of fact, I thought I saw her here tonight, but she had left before I could speak to her." Nancy was excited about this news. "What is this other Nancy Drew's full name?" "Nancy Smith Drew." "Did she ever work for your family?" Nancy queried. "Yes, she did. She was a governess for my brother and me for a few years. She left to become an actress." Nancy looked at the young woman. "Are you, by any chance, Miss Wilson?" "Yes, I am." Nancy explained how she had telephoned to the Wilson home and left a message that if her mother ever heard from Nancy Smith Drew, she was to tell her that an inheritance awaited her in England. "Oh, how marvelous!" Miss Wilson exclaimed. "I've been away at school and my parents didn't pass along the message." "You said you thought Miss Drew was here tonight?" Nancy asked. "Yes, I'm sure I saw her in the back of the auditorium when I happened to turn around, just before the show started. I left my seat and tried to find her, but couldn't. She went out of the building." People in the theater had started to crowd past the two girls, and now a young man who had been with Miss Wilson came back. After introducing him to Nancy, she told him what they had been talking about. Nancy said, "Possibly this Nancy Smith Drew is still around. She must have come back for some reason, possibly to see the play. Miss Wilson, could you take a few minutes to help me find her, since you know Miss Drew?" "I'll be glad to." Miss Wilson turned to the young man, Frank Doolittle, whom Nancy had recognized as one of the star players on the Emerson football squad. Nancy now introduced Ned, then told him, "We'll be right back. Meet you in front of the theater." She and Miss Wilson dashed in front of the others. Reaching the outside, Miss Wilson suddenly exclaimed, "There goes Miss Drew now!" She pointed to a side door of the gymnasium. The two girls ran like mad, opened the door, and dashed inside. Only a dim light was burning, and they could not see very far ahead, but realized that the corridor turned abruptly. "Miss Drew! Miss Drew!" Miss Wilson called. When no response came, Nancy tried her luck, but received no answer. She and Miss Wilson dashed to the end of the corridor, then turned the corner. They saw no one. "Wherever could she have been going?" Miss Wilson asked. Nancy could only guess. Maybe Miss Drew left some clothes in a locker in one of the rooms, and she wanted to get them now that she apparently has severed her connection with the dramatic club. The two girls went through another door, and this time found themselves at the foot of a flight of metal steps that spiraled both upward and downward. A single unshaded electric bulb illuminated the stairwell feebly. "Up or down?" Marion Wilson asked. "Let's go down first," Nancy answered. "Or, let's save time. I'll go down and you go up." When Nancy reached the floor below, she found herself in the furnace room. Sure there would be no lockers here, she turned and scurried up the steps. Miss Wilson was just coming down. Nothing up there but a big dark room, and the stairs continued to the roof. Miss Drew must have used another exit, Nancy speculated. Well, I guess all we can do is leave. At that moment, the light went out. "Oh dear," her companion cried. "They're turning out the lights and locking up." The two girls dashed along the corridor, feeling the walls until they came to the outer door. Nancy tried to lift the long bar which opened it, but this would not budge. "We're locked in," she exclaimed, and began banging on the door with her fist and crying, "Let us out! We're trapped!" There was not a sound from outside. "Whatever will we do?" Marion Wilson asked nervously. "Frankly, I don't know, but let me think a minute." A few moments later, Nancy said, "That dark room you saw, were there any windows in it?" "Yes, several." "Maybe we can get out that way," Nancy suggested. The girls groped their way along the corridor and up the spiral stairway. They opened the door to the dark room and made their way toward one of the windows. To their dismay, chicken wire was tacked over it, and the window could not be opened. All the others had been protected the same way. "I wonder which side of the theater this is on," Nancy speculated. "If we could only attract someone's attention." "But how?" Marion Wilson asked. "I guess we'll have to break the glass and yell." "But the chicken wire was put up there so the glass wouldn't get broken," Marion pointed out. Nancy said she realized this, but hoped that a hard blow would break the wire as well as the glass. She began to feel around the floor with her feet, hoping to locate some heavy object. Presently, she found what felt like a cannonball. She assumed it was a ball used for shot put contests. There was enough light outside for the girls to see anyone going by. As Nancy picked up the metal ball, Marion Wilson exclaimed, "I just saw a car drive up! Nancy Smith Drew got into it!" Nancy rushed forward, hoping to break the glass and attract the young woman's attention. But in a second, the car was gone. A feeling of exasperation came over her. Suppose no one else came past whose attention she could attract. "Here come a couple of boys! Quick, break the glass!" Marion cried out. Nancy heaved the heavy ball, and it did the trick. The chicken wire bent and the glass shattered. "They heard it!" Marion cried out, jumping up and down hopefully. Together, the two girls screamed out, "Ned! Frank!" The boys looked around. "Up here!" Nancy called. "We're locked in upstairs in the gym." Ned and Frank gazed upward in astonishment. "How'd you get there?" Frank asked. "It's a long story," Marion replied. "Spooky in here. I don't like it." "We'll have you out in a minute," Ned said. The two boys raced off to find the ground superintendent so he could open the door. Meanwhile, the girls groped their way down the stairs and were waiting at the door when it was finally opened. "Thanks," they said, locking arms with their dates. "Boy, what were you trying to do?" Frank asked. "Catch up with an actress," said Nancy, chuckling. "You missed a chance for some excitement." An explanation was quickly given. Nancy ended the story with the rueful statement that Nancy Smith Drew had disappeared again. "What? Then Coach was here? That's a funny one," Frank remarked. Ned said, "Pretty shabby way to treat the Emerson Drama Club." Nancy suddenly had an idea. "Ned," she said, "let's get my car and go to the place where Nancy Smith Drew lives. Maybe we can still stop her from getting married to Edgar Nixon." The two said goodbye to the other couple and dashed off toward the fraternity house. They had almost reached it when a large rock came whizzing through the air. It was aimed directly at Nancy. End of chapter 13.